Hi, this is Anthony Sider. The following is the Meet the Mediator podcast created as part of Family Mediation Week 2021. Hope you enjoy. Great, good afternoon, and thank you both for joining me for our second Meet the Mediators discussion. Joined today by James and Christine, who are mediators that have given their time to discuss their pathways into mediation and talk a little bit as well about the benefits of mediation and what they enjoy about the work. I'll hand it over to each of you to just introduce yourself really and give us a bit of a background into your experience in mediation as well. So if I could start with you, James.
Yeah, certainly. Hi there. So my name is James Carroll. I'm a family solicitor and mediator. Been in practice for about 20 years, 15 of those as a mediator. What I find most interesting about this is that when I say to people I'm a family lawyer, their first impressions is that straight away they go, oh, you're a divorce lawyer. Well, I'll only be a divorce lawyer if I want to exclude 50% of the population who aren't married. So no, I'm a family lawyer. Families come in all different shapes and sizes. And the second bit is it's far away from the image of being what a lawyer is like. My job is to help people separate sensibly, or sometimes even enter into relationships sensibly. It's far away from that image of what a lawyer does each day, and mediation is an absolute kind of central part of that practice.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for that, James. And Christine, hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So my background is that I've always worked in family law since my early 20s, and with over 20 years experience working with families, I went down the path of looking into mediation as a way of parties being in control of their own futures really, and what was going to happen. I've always spoke with clients on the basis that one day all the judges will be gone, the solicitors will be gone, the mediators will be gone, and you have to continue on in life with the decisions that have been made. And through mediation, it does help parties try and work out together how the future is going to look, and it's more sustainable if it has been their agreement rather than a court imposed one. And I always say to clients, what are you going to do when we're all gone? And that just sort of grounds them a little and starts to make them take back responsibility for the future and the decisions that they're about to make. And obviously through the court process, you've got the long-term costs, the emotional side of it, the losing control of what happens next. And so going through mediation gives that back to them, and tries or attempts to reduce the scope and intensity of ongoing disputes within the family and extended family members and everyone affected by what has happened. So I do enjoy mediation. I do enjoy helping them make a difference and being in control of their own futures.
Great. And yeah, it's something that I often think about really in terms of when people approach mediation, they're quite often just unaware of what mediation is, or if they are aware, a lot of the times that their perception of what mediation is completely different to the reality of it. I think one of the things that stands out to me a lot is the amount of input that clients have in the process. They're not really expecting that as much. I think a lot of the times families are thinking that the mediator will be doing the bulk of the lifting, but really it requires a lot of participation on their part too, which is great, as you say, Christine, because it means that they gain some of that. They're empowered really to make these decisions that are going to be affecting their own lives. James, you're still practicing, so how do you manage that balance? I guess there's different situations that require different things, isn't there?
There absolutely is. I consider myself to be fairly lucky. I work at Russell Kirk, which is a central London practice, but DR is through and through. So it's second nature. I always find it quite interesting working with more junior lawyers, looking at those in my firm who, by their very nature, talk in DR terms. That it's just what they do for a living, and comparing them sometimes to their peers who still see this as alternative, and I'm like, where is finding a solution? Alternative to what? I'm glad that we dropped the alternative, or indeed when it went through this stage of going normative dispute resolution. When people are going through kind of change and transition in their families, they don't want to enter into normative dispute resolution. It doesn't speak to people at all. So it depends where you come from, I think, as a practitioner, and I really don't subscribe to the fact that I wear a lawyer hat and a mediator hat. I do different things, but actually, and there's a different skill set, but it comes from your kind of internal ethos as to how you practice, more than kind of being dictated to by the label of what you're doing. That said, I know that sometimes I'm, by virtue of the fact that I'm still a practicing solicitor, I may be in court, and that's the very nature of it. I'm a firm believer, though, in that you can litigate constructively. It doesn't mean that you suddenly have to turn into a different person when you're, whether that be the professional or the client. If you're in a context which is about adjudication rather than an agreement, you can still do that civilly, and that's actually something which I talk to my mediation clients about. One of the things I do that though is when I go from one to the other, I need at least a 15-minute, half-hour break between one to the other, just because there's the role you're performing and how you talk is different.
And I think importantly as well, for clients or potential clients to understand that mediation doesn't necessarily mean that it's instead of getting legal advice. It's as well as, getting legal advice. It's great because it gives you more context, more information, so that when you're in that mediation, you're able to make more informed decisions. Christine, for you, when you made the decision to work exclusively in mediation, was that something that you felt was a natural step for you?
I did, because what had basically happened is, in court with litigants in person, you find yourself sort of in the waiting areas, and the other party's looking at you, wanting a chat. And I was drawn more and more to trying to help the parties try and come to an understanding, to assist them in front of the judge, to be involved with the decision making, and to talk before they went in. There is a lot of misunderstandings that can lead to great dispute and conflict between parties over something very trivial, under that misunderstanding that is actually fueling and leading the litigation. And the opportunity to have that talk before those decisions are made is very important. And the more I was doing it in court, the more I thought, I need to get out the court forum and start to use this in a different way. But then for a short period of time, I did actually become an in-court mediator. So I was actually in court being a mediator. So the judges were sending the parties out. So that was quite useful, and it's something that I think should be continued to be explored and looked at.
I really like the reference in just to talking, that because often I will use the phrase that we're not in dispute here, we just got some decisions to make, and that we just need to go through a process. We'll get some information, kind of what your situation is, whether it be factual, financial information, learn a bit about your kids. We'll get some legal information, and together we'll try and make those decisions. And that reframing it from it's a good mediation phrase, reframing, from dispute to decision. That in itself just feels different. Of course, you've got some decisions to make. Your family's going through some form of change, probably potentially separation. That's a big change. There's quite a lot of decisions to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for the most part, when people come to mediation, what they quickly realize is that they've both got the same, they've got the shared goal. They're both wanting the best outcome possible for their kids, or they're both wanting a fair, financial agreement at the end. It's how to get there, really. And also, a lot of the time, it's just the assumption that they're in dispute. Whereas actually, if you sit down and you actually start to look at things in detail and unpack what each of them think is fair, it might be a different way of getting there, but they end up at the same point.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though sometimes people, particularly if they've started going down a different process, whether it be a court process or even just initially instructing a solicitor, feel sometimes that they have to stick with that process?
I would say that depends on how much information they've been given or had access to. Sometimes they're not aware that there are different ways of managing the same issue. One of the main things that I hear clients say initially at their initial meetings when they're trying to understand what the process is I've been told you are not going to take sides. And that's quite correct. That is exactly what the mediator's role is, to be a neutral, impartial third party and not take sides or sit in judgment. And that is so important for the clients to hear, to balance the conversation between them, knowing that no one is going to take sides and they are going to sit as the third party and not be making decisions behind the back.
Something there which I really pick up on, which is about I loved Chrissy's description of that's the type of language you talk in. I don't take sides. That speaks to people. I'm not a huge fan of kind of labels about all of these things, and I think actually just be able to engage with people in a way that they understand what you're talking about. They understand the concept of not taking sides. I'm not a judge. Don't make judgments. I mean, it's those type of things. When I talk about financial decisions, I say to them, you've done it way before you've been introduced to me. The process is about working out what you got, what you're going to do with it. It's actually really not that complicated. You may just have never done it in this context before. So I'm here to kind of help you guys because I've done it many a time in this context before. So it's really kind of taking them into a realm that this is okay, that this is just a conversation in which we'll work through together and we'll kind of try our best to see if we can come up with a way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always add to clients to consider that mediation is a process, not a single event. So, you can get in touch with the mediator to get that initial information without feeling as though you have to follow right through on that process. Having a MIAM or a mediation information and assessment meeting is just to explore whether this is an option that is right for you and is right for your family. Do you think that the awareness of mediation generally is increasing? I mean, the two of you have been mediators for a while now, certainly have a lot more experience than myself. Do you feel as though it's a notable increase in awareness compared to when you started mediating?
Well, when I started, we was looking at things just weren't digital. They were not digital, and the introduction of using apps and the internet and people's access to mobile phones and being able to search has certainly changed the entire landscape of mediation, and it has increased self-referrals. People are looking for answers and finding it themselves rather than being in the dark. So we do have more self-referrals, and people say, oh, well, I've Googled it, I've looked it up, and this is what I've been told what's going to happen. So that is useful. I think it could certainly increase. We could do with some public announcements about mediation for those that don't have such access or don't know what to Google, using getting the correct terminology. So they are reliant on family members and friends who may have been through it. And if they're fortunate enough to be able to engage with the solicitor financially, then obviously they do have that added information. And the citizens' advice, they played a large part in the awareness of mediation as well, and that's been very useful. But we're getting there. It's very slow.
Anything that you'd add to that, James?
Probably just the observation that I think by and large now people have heard of it, that it's a relatively commonplace word to use. That doesn't necessarily mean though that there's an understanding about it. I mean, we were talking before the recording about the people getting confused with medication or
meditation. Yeah.
Which is I think we all struggle sometimes when we start typing and we end up with the wrong one. But so there's by and large there's kind of a bit of a it's out there, but it's not necessarily understood. And in many ways, actually, that's a huge improvement on where we were previously. Where I think it also, though, has improved is the concept of both government policy towards it and the court's approach towards it. Government policy is about supporting families, and that to me stays supporting families whether they're together or not. And the court approach to it, woe betide the days when you heard a judge saying, well, we're here now, we may as well get on with it. Well, that kind of get on with what? These get on with the idea of turning the separation into a litigation doesn't, to me, sound particularly positive. So if people haven't actually explored something, it's really important to say, no, the default way of making your decisions now, of sorting out what you need to sort out, is that you work together and you sort about. The default way is no longer the court. So I think we're in an improved position, but much yet to do.
No, I completely agree with that. I think as well, in time, when people are going through different, situations within their family, they turn to their close friends or their family members who have been through something similar. And I think that's changing more from saying, oh, well, I use this solicitor, go and see them, to, oh, well, actually, I use this mediation company, go and have a chat with them, which is great. As long as people, I guess, know that the options are available to them, that's what's most important. That sort of leads to one of the last points that I was wanting to discuss with the two of you about the biggest myths really about mediation. It's one of the themes that we're doing as part of Family Mediation Week, is trying to debunk some of the myths that might be out there. Just to get the ball rolling, one that I had considered is similar to what you were saying at the beginning of this, James, which is that it's not just for people who are getting a divorce and have children. It can be for grandparents who are trying to get access to their grandchildren to get some contact in place. It could be for people who aren't married and going through a separation. I did a mediation just before Christmas, which was regarding a lot of things, but primarily actually around what was going to happen with the family pet. So it's for whatever difficult conversations families may need to have to help them get through that change. I don't know if either of you wanting to sort of add from that, or if you've got some other myths, mediation myths, that you want to take the opportunity to debunk.
I think you're quite right in that many people feel, well, those that don't feel that mediation is trying to get them back together, because that's a myth, which is growing out of relate mediation for keeping couples together. We're helping couples separate or deal with other family disputes, which, as you quite rightly say, it could be grandparents, it could be aunties, uncles, special guardianship arrangements. There's bereavements in families. You're dealing with child support in some cases, how to divide the assets, what happens when two people who don't have children but own a property, how do they deal with the house, and all those sort of issues. And obviously there's also the child inclusive mediation as well. So I'm a child consultant, so I'm trying to see children and have a voice in cases that are appropriate for that as well. So it is everything where there's been a connection between two people, really.
Absolutely. Anything from you, James?
Yeah, from my perspective, what I'd want to talk about is the whether it be described as a myth or a kind of presumption about how it is that working with mediation clients, what they expect to be asked to be done almost become that they feel they need to become little lawyers, that they need to be prepared to kind of fight their corner or convince the other person, or indeed try and convince the mediator that they're in the right. And I enjoy those conversations with them, and I dial that right back down. I was like, no. We start with the objective that your objective is to hear, and then also we go one stage further, to be heard. The classic 2 ears, 1 mouth, listeners twice as much as you speak, and then taking them that away from that concept of the fact that no, this isn't advocacy, this isn't actually adopting and advancing a position, because actually that's really not going to work actually. But if you actually listen a bit, you might actually find that it's beautiful when you see it happening, when it just starts flowing. That I'm quite a proactive mediator. I often describe myself as I roll my sleeves up and get involved in the conversation. But my favorite moment is when I see the conversation turning into a conversation between the 2 people, and I just sit back and I just let it happen. And when those moments happen, it's absolutely, Christine used the word at the start, it's really enjoyable to be part of that.
Something that I always remember from my mediation training was that, a mediation's going well if you can feel the back of your chair.
Yeah.
if you're sitting back. Yeah. And I guess that just, what you both sort of talked about really is that mediation is it is a process. There is some things about it. It is a set process that we help guide people through, but it's also very flexible and adaptable to the unique families and individuals who we're working with, and that mediators will do what they can to make the process work for them. And James, I was just having a bit of a look at your bio prior to this as well, prior to this conversation, and wondered if you could talk a little bit about the other side of things. You were saying it can be as forensic as people want it to be as well. It can be quite detailed.
Yeah, certainly some of my practice, whether it be as a solicitor or as a mediator, involves incredibly complex situations. There may be offshore structures, there may be film schemes, carried interest, all words which often the years back I would have absolutely panicked me. But the fact that your finances are complex doesn't mean you need to fight it out. I don't really understand that concept of there's not a correlation between the two, or the fact that your family structure may be complex as to how it was created or who's involved in it. That doesn't mean you have to fight it out either. So the process itself isn't dictated to by looking for easy situations which can easily be resolved. It's not that at all. It's just a process where anybody in a family situation who needs to make decisions can join in, irrespective of what it's about. So, I may look at commissioning complex pension reports, business valuations, etc. It can be what I love about it is you do what's needed rather than merely following some kind of predetermined path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry. Just adding to that, James, is when it comes down to the finances, in mediation, it's quite helpful because the mediators showing what it is that they need to collate, what they need to get together. And we've done our formies, and I was like, did you agree everything in it? Are you happy with the content? Well, no, it's fabrication of everything. So we're going back to basics again. We say, so what do you want to talk about? Well, I'm dividing assets. Does anybody want to talk about where they want to live in the future? Shall we maybe start with that? Do you want to continue being under the same roof, or are we going to talk about an exit strategy? And it's just keeping that and getting them back to the basics. And I do say to clients, in finances, agreements were made or decisions were made for how you was going to build your finances or your investments, and you had an understanding of what was going to happen had you been together. Now you're not together. What we're planning is an exit. So how would you like to exit? Would you like to exit together under a joint agreement, one that you both feel is fair and reasonable in all the circumstances, or do you want somebody else to tell you what to do with it? And the majority of the time, they say, well, we'd like to give it a shot and still be in charge of our own destinies, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just because we don't take sides, just because we're neutral, doesn't mean that we don't have information that we want to provide them with, and knowledge and expertise around what other options may be available for them as well. Because obviously mediating, we would hope, would result in an agreement. It doesn't, that's not always right for every family. And that's part of our role as well, is to make sure that this is a process that continues to be safe, continues to be suitable for the people we're working with too.
What I was saying about heard and be heard, I'm like, that's your worst case scenario. If we get you to the point that you've heard each other, well, that's an achievement in itself. To me, that is a successful mediation.
And also, if it does break down, if they're unable to reach an agreement, at least they know why they're now going to court. They know what the issues are between them, what is agreed and what isn't agreed. So at least we may have reduced the amount of topics that they need to discuss with the judge. They may have cleared up some things and only have maybe 1 or 2 items that really needs to be looked at.
Absolutely. And for anyone that might be listening, considering looking into mediation as an option for them and for their family, can have a look at the Family Mediation Council website. The 3 of us are all registered family mediators, and it's very easy to be able to search and find a mediator close to you. Thank you both so much for joining me for this, and hopefully we've been able to shed some light on mediation and family mediation, and be able to help families, point them in the right direction to getting in touch with someone local that can help.